Well, hello again, and as we continue building with Claude Code, in the previous episode, we were just kind of running through, uh, trying to get some of those errors that we were seeing after we added the sync logic between the front end and the back end. And I guess the good news is that we actually got somewhere. So, quick recap of what we were able to do is very quickly, basically, we needed to ensure that all of the TypeScript and the lint errors were no longer there. And then it was actually calling like almost like the wrong APIs for TinyBase. And so at some point, just needed to pointed to some of these documents that were in here related to how you write to a store or you read from a store. And between getting rid of those, we were able to get to the point where we could see our app running locally with no errors, no warnings, and we've got some information being printed out. The data is loading from the store. So all in all, it looks like we've got some good progress, and we also have this sync error that we can see here that says whether or not we are here or not. That's got a sync error. Who knows what's going on? We could potentially check that out. Maybe the database isn't running. So we can go ahead and check cursor and just ensure that we don't have any issues with the back end as well. Well, it looks like it's running pretty well. I'm not sure if it knows how to get at the back end, but let's go ahead and check that out. I remember when it was actually building the files and everything, I saw something called an API base URL, and it's in this API client code. And if you kind of figure out where is this coming from, that's a good question, because I'm not sure if it's expecting it to be, I think it's expecting it to be in the same port, because it's always been thinking that everything is on port 800. So I can quickly go back to Claude Code and maybe just start everything afresh and let it know that I need to ensure that it's pointing to the right API URL. So just give it some information that my front end is working on this port and the back end here. So I wanted to set it that it works correctly. Actually, before I do that, and I can actually exit out of that, I just wanted to commit the changes so we can kind of like start afresh. Oh, this is a really good thing. So Claude Code does actually use a lot of credits, and at some point it'll tell you to add funds. So hop on a second, I need to feed the machine. Claude should be a little happier again, so I'm just gonna say try again. And hopefully it should go and look at all the changed files, and then based on that create for me a really nice commit message. And after that we can go ahead and continue with the next step. All right, so now that we have almost like a checkpoint, let's go ahead and start to debug and let it know that I am actually running these on two separate ports, because at this point it never did ask me to set up what is that link, and I think that might be what's going on, and I actually don't want it to hard code it, so I'll just let it know. Could you read this from an env file? Env file. All right, so hopefully it will go ahead and change that out. Gotcha. So because this is a Vite app, you probably just need to start it with a Vite and then whatever it is that you want so that it can potentially read it properly. And always good to have an example file, because the .env file is typically not checked into source control, and you need an example file so folks can see it. So here you go. So it can actually get the API base URL or read it from Vite. And once it's going, we can create a new API client and call it. So I'm going to let it cycle and allow it to potentially get things through. And what we're hoping to see is that when it's done, we are able to actually see our program or on our website that it's actually doing this without any errors. So let's have this side by side so we can do that. It's always nice to update the README file, especially related to any changes like that. And it doesn't have an ignore file, which it should, because we need to make sure that the .env is not in there. There is an ignore file at the top level, which should be fine as well, but it's okay to kind of put this in there as well. I don't want to do this right now. I just want to make sure that I can test and see what's going on. So I still see a sync error. So I'm hoping that things are kind of working okay. Actually, I might ask it to go to that link and figure out why there is a sync error. So a sync error on the front end screen. Go to that, to the front end URL and see to investigate. Okay. And I guess use Puppeteer. It probably knows to do that, but just to double check, I will let it know. And so what it's done is it's popped up Puppeteer as well. So I've got Puppeteer all popped up, and you can see it right here, and it's asking me to click on the element. Okay, I'm not sure what it's saying, but click on the sync error. And I guess it's trying to see if the help is working okay. It looks like that's okay, so the sync stat indicator should at least saying it's online, which is good. And it's just basically going to check if the endpoint on the backend is working, which it probably won't work because you don't have the auth. That might be it. Actually, let me go ahead and see if it can try it, because it should know unauthorized, and that's what I expected would happen. And so it should know that it actually hasn't sent anything related to the bearer code. And this is what we had to do when we were testing it out through Postman. So I am going to let it make this change, because this is actually not a bad change, but I don't think that's going to be the solution. So let me let it know. According to the server code, there should be some authorization. How can we set that up? So all right, so the backend requires authorization. So what could the auth look like on the front end? And it kind of is checking what needs to happen. It's reading the env and the example. And maybe it's going to hard code something, maybe make a call. But this was a missing piece that probably could have been solved in the beginning by just not having authorization. But let's see, what is it trying to do in the meantime here? So in the front-end services, it's got some, maybe making some changes. I'm not sure what that's about. Sometimes it might go off the rails, but hang on, it's added some things. Okay, let's go ahead and say okay. So it's creating auth context to know whether I'm authorized or not. And then it's got the API client that it's going to be able to pass to it, probably in the token string. And then, all right, then we might have an error. if you don't have it as well. Although I'm thinking that if you're just doing the subscriptions or the health check, you don't need that, but that's true. So let's go ahead and make these changes. I actually wanted to use React query, but I might do that as a implementation improvement later on. So I'll let it go through this set of steps, and when we get to a good point, I'll come back. All right, we've got to kind of like an interesting point. It's going to create a login form for me with some default information in there just for testing. But I also want to bring your attention to the fact that on the browser, we now have synced in green, so that's a good thing. And now it's getting me to create this login form, so I'm going to say yes. And at that point, we should be able to get something up and running so that we can at least get the subscriptions back and also add some subscriptions and sync them as well. So as we continue going, it's adding these context providers so that we can know whether or not we're authenticated. Additionally, if you look at the browser, it has now been changed and we've got a login form all set up right there. So let's continue working with this and see what we can see as the browser continues to get set up and everything with authentication. And I guess for testing, it's actually helped me out and it's put the default one. Definitely that will be gone when we go into production mode as we clean up the data. So we've gone in and made a bunch of changes and everything seems to be at least looking fine. So I'm going to say go ahead and make a commit for the changes that are there. And I'm quite happy as it's doing this to see that it's working at least on the browser side. And let's just log in actually to see that it's working and able to log in and get the information, assuming it's syncing from the backend. This floating status, I'm not sure what that's about, but that might be something that we debug for the next time. As it checks in the code that we've made so far, we're going to be debugging why we're not getting information back. But yep, it's been another kind of fun debugging stuff with here, and we can go ahead and check things out and see where we find ourselves next time. So join me in the next session as we continue just playing around with Claude Code.